Hello, you're listening to the Eric McKenna Project.
So, congratulations, I think.
You think?
Our new school director in North Hills.
Yes, thank you. It was something I've always wanted on my bucket list for my 40s. It included to be in a play of some sort.
Okay.
Which hasn't happened yet. I just told my husband this the other day too. And to be involved in politics in some capacity. And so when it was brought to me that there was a seat open, or a few seats open, obviously, for school board, I thought it was perfect timing. 3 children. Mm-hmm. Right time to do so. If you're going to talk the talk, walk the walk kind of thing, I'm a very big advocate in the fact that if you don't volunteer, don't complain. And so get in and figure it out, see how it works, do what I can do to contribute, and obviously have lots to learn. But yeah, I had my first acclimation meeting and very, very overwhelmed, felt a little stupid, but somehow you put your big girl pants on and figure it out. Mm-hmm. So thanks.
Yeah, it's it's a new journey.
It's a new journey for sure.
It's a new journey.
Yeah, it's a new chapter. And, I think it's all part of life because you have to have that balance, right?
Yeah.
And that's my balance.
That's the craziest thing when we first met that I noticed is nothing. She's in fear of nothing.
Right.
And I don't mean that in a bold or a pompous way, but she's always willing to try something else and say, I want to drive for this. And in the meantime, she doesn't get enough kudos about how much she does a life balance because she does all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And her and Willie still have a great family life as well. So it's not like anybody's gone to be a career. She's an exemplary career woman as to how she balances everything. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
Well, I'm thrilled you both are here.
Thank you.
This is special for me. You have been not on my radar. I have been listening and watching the whole YaJagoff experience. And that word is a special place in my heart.
Oh, boy.
We appreciate that.
So I really wanted to find out, I really am curious to find out how it started, who had the idea, who used the word more before you had the podcast out of you two. But how are we sitting here today? How did this happen?
Yeah.
How did this happen?
Jeez. Well, it started off. So there's a AR and BR, before Rachel and after Rachel time frame.
Okay.
So
no one uses that but him, so don't feel.
So I got laid off from a vice president job, and that was probably, I thought, was the last job of my career, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So one thing I needed to know was learn social media. Okay. So I called my friend Dan Casciato and I said, Dan, how do I start a blog? And I think he still works with us, and I think he hates himself every day for answering that phone call because I'm not a technical guy, and we always, when we're crying, we're calling Dan. But anyways, here's how you start a blog. So I started this blog called YaJagoff.com, and it was about basically, the first blog was something regarding the Penguins, but the idea behind it was I was driving through Stowe Township, and there was a bus driving down Broadway. And if you're familiar with Broadway in Stowe Township, it's the longest road. Mm-hmm. And when you're behind a bus who does not pull over, I get very angry. and I thought, I need a place to take a picture, post a picture of this bus who, one, will not get out of my way, but more importantly, will not pull over to the curb to pick up their customers. They're making them walk out on the street. Right. So YaJagoff.com was started. And fast forward, I got kind of, I started, I didn't want anybody to know it was me, only because I didn't want a false sense of security that people were reading it because people in my network. Mm-hmm. And so I started asking for help on the internet. And there was a company, Wahine Media, in Hawaii, 3 ladies. Okay. And I reached out and said,
In Hawaii,
why not, right?
Smart guy.
And so I reached out.
Business means you had to go to?
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's what it turned out to be, because I said, how do I do this? And I had some questions, and they were helpful. So it was great. And so one day I sent them a Don't Be a Jagoff t-shirt to say thank you. And they didn't know what that meant. However, one Saturday I was sitting at home and my Twitter page started just lighting up. And they had a Hawaii social media conference where they were showing my shirt, and they were talking about, they don't even know what a Jagoff is, but they helped me do this, and they built a relationship with a guy in Pittsburgh to help him use social media, and now he's doing this. The following 2 years, I was a speaker at the Hawaii Social Media Summit talking about Jagoffs and how to build relationships through social media. So it was great. So my daughter got a nice trip to Hawaii in her senior year. Anyways, fast forward, started to wonder, like, what can I do with this? And I solicited the help of a guy named Jason Falls, who wrote a book called No Bullshit Social Media. He looked at it and he said, I think you have something, blah, 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 blah. And he said, and I think you need, on top of your blogging and your videos, you need to start a podcast. And I thought, do I need to do one more free thing in my life, right? And so we started a podcast. And so the videos started where we were interview interesting people, from the guy who plays the saxophone that chastises you as you're walking across the bridge to PNC Park, to the Oakmont Bakery and how to make an Oakmonter. And fast forward, it's now the so people used to find the blog and then find the podcast. The podcast has now blown up in the BR days, or AR days after Rachael, and the podcast has now become a thing where people kind of find the podcast and then they kind of find the blog after that. So we still write blogs about people that are embarrassing the rest of us, Pittsburghers, dumb criminals, bad parking people, and in the meantime we do this.
And our families, people seem to like our family ones better.
Right, yeah. I mean, I would sit down in the bathroom and not have any toilet paper, so I'd write my kids up as Jagoffs. Like, do we,
Yeah.
So now here we are. We have this podcast, and it's turned into a media company, and and it's all, we laid a lot of groundwork, and the history is important. But the fact is, associating myself with Rachael and her ability to adopt it heart, mind, and soul as deeply as I did, and think he's not just this crazy person, or he is a crazy person, I'm just as crazy as her, and Willie's just as crazy as the rest of us, because he plays into it and supports it, and here we are today. So that's the fact. I don't know, did I do that fast enough? I think
you did.
Without boring
Listen,
anybody.
your microphones are so great. When he does that,
I know.
Yeah.
Can you get him? Like,
can
you wrap his hands around the chair? Maybe?
Right?
Yeah, I'm trying to be Rush Limbaugh.
Listen, I was trying
Rush
to.
Limbaugh.
Wait, there was the paper, right? The paper. Rustle the paper.
I was trying to make eye contact while I was talking to tell him to stop, but I didn't
Sorry
get
about
that
that.
far.
Yeah.
I think absolutely, and
Wait, one quick question because I'll forget. So, did you use the word Jagoff in the lexicon of your life much before the show? It was on the tip of your tongue?
That's funny.
No, that's a great question, and we literally just the namesake is right here in Coriopolis for the blog, because when I was a paramedic, we would go to a place called the Stroll Inn in Kennedy Township.
Oh my gosh!
And Bugga, who owned the Stroll Inn, she would call everybody an effing Jagoff and whatever, but she would call you a Jagoff in a term of endearment as well. She'd say, "Hey, that Jagoff just ran out on the bill," but you would walk in and she'd say, "How you doing, you Jagoff?" And so Bugga at the Stroll Inn is really the person that's the namesake. And it was only just a few months ago we finally sat her down for one of our Jagged Around with John and Rachael videos and got her at the Stroll Inn to talk about the word Jagoff.
Very cool.
So she is the namesake of the blog. My family never really. And you guys, did you? Your mom used it a little bit?
I think my mom uses it more now as a word than I remember it being. We weren't big, my parents didn't swear a lot, but it wasn't a swear word. It was never considered a swear word for our connotation, at least. So I don't think I remember using it a lot either.
Yeah.
And we are not, something that we both say all the time is Jagoff can be coined with being a yinzer. And while we use the term as a Pittsburgh umbrella versus a yinzer thing, because it's super important to me that the articulation, you're never going to hear me say "inat" or it's just not my thing. I'm not, and we just talked about this. It's easy to slip up, right? We live in in this area that we mash words together, and I've even noticed myself.
Why do we do that here?
I don't know. It's terrible. Like, slow it down. As we were talking off air, slow it down and sort of just take your time. But ultimately, you're not going to hear us do the the kind of Pittsburgh dad
The
thing.
Yinzer.
The Yinzer thing, yeah. It's a little different.
Yeah, but the name, when I first started at YaJagoff on Twitter, all of a sudden people started following and people started tweeting, why would you not be from Pittsburgh? Why would you be from Pittsburgh and not follow an account called YaJagoff?
Yeah, right.
And it's met some negativity in that a couple of times we've tried to interview people, the Harlem Globetrotters being one, and they'll say, well, it doesn't really fit our brand. But people like the Gateway Clipper and all these family-oriented Marvel comics, they allow us to come in because they understand that we're not on the podcast or the videos acting like that, acting like Yinzers, as Rachel just said.
Right.
Yeah, or even in a negative way. Jagoff,
yeah, we're not. It's a very positive, all about Pittsburgh type thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good delineation's the right word.
Sure.
My vocabulary's not that expanded, but that it's not. It's separate from the Yinzer and that's the Pittsburgh ease, that's slang. It's a standalone. It's a standalone word, a standalone phrase, a standalone name for that matter.
Yeah, right.
And I think marketing that way is the way to do it. It's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, I don't even know that either of us can take the credit in the thank you, but I think it was natural, right? It was, we are not going to go that route because we want to be more established as creative minds. And we do represent Pittsburgh. Neither of us have any intention of going anywhere. This is where we've always been. I went as far as Johnstown for college and that's it, so it just sort of made sense. And I say this too, when John, prior to me, had another...
Please use proper terms, BR.
BR had another co-host. And at the time, I remember working for an agency and being like, well, what's this YaJagoff podcast? I mean, it's probably two meathead dudes talking about nonsense that will annoy me, right? Until you listen. And it wasn't like that at all. It was the complete opposite. It was this great, right? How did you describe it?
Yeah, we just tried to talk about all the cool things going on in Pittsburgh, whether it was business, whether it was entertainment, whether it was event-based.
And it was.
Or just a cool, our goal was to find the unique people in Pittsburgh and tell their stories in a way, similar to you, but, ours are short bits. But again, everybody knows the saxophone guy that plays outside on the bridge that heckles you.
Yeah.
But who knows him, right? Who knows his name is Reggie?
Right.
Who knows, where, that kind of thing. So that was the whole goal behind it,
Now, your background,
so it's pretty cool.
Did you have broadcasting, media? Did you have all that in your background?
Complete wannabe.
Okay.
When I was a paramedic in marketing and EMS for years, and always wanted to do. I always thought if I became a millionaire, I'd buy a radio station and host a morning radio show. So
he has a great voice. That voice is perfect.
And so then at one point, I actually did work a full-time job and went into a radio station in Monroeville to do morning radio. It was a sun up to sundown radio station, and we bought our own donuts. And we did it until the property was foreclosed upon.
Okay.
But I would go in there at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to my real job at 10 o'clock, 10:30 after, and I loved every minute of it. I never made a dime from it, but I loved it. But so no real broadcasting. Really, I always say we're just hacks. I'm a hack, but in the meantime, it's kind of worked out. I think we both find ourselves interested in people and interested in, like you, right? You just want to talk to people that are
passionate for it.
Yeah, right.
To hear the stories and understand. To me, it's a thirst for. It's always probably a thirst for understanding, but to get that understanding, you have to dive into the story.
Right.
Right. And so that's kind of organically for me. That's why we're probably sitting here.
Yeah.
Sure.
How did Rachel enter the picture, and when did you say to yourself, "I think she should stick around"? I think she should stick around.
How should she? Well, that's a good question.
She said
because I told him, how does she stick around? Should she stick around? So basically, I do have a journalistic background, and so I grew up, and I sort of tell the story that my father is Johnny Angel from Johnny Angel and the Halos. Therefore, I was sort of born into this. Rachel, you are going to meet Chuck Berry today, and you are going to look him in the eye and say, "Hello, Mr. Berry," and you're going to have a conversation. And I was dreadfully shy and, insecure and, a kid. And so you sort of figure out that these random people who are musicians are going to constantly be in your life. So sink or swim, sister. And so I figured out that get over the shyness by my parents would say, just eye contact. Hi, Mr. Whomever or Miss Whomever. And so I think I learned without knowing at a young age how to communicate with people at all levels, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I don't think I realized that
Sure.
until after I worked in journalism, because it came naturally to me because of that. And so it's a gift that I'm fortunate, I guess, to have, because I feel that there's not anyone that I could not have a conversation with. And I do think that's difficult if you don't know how, especially in today's age.
No question.
So, I was raised with, being around the Temptations and James Brown and things like that. And so it was sort of
teaser.
natural.
Ask her about the James Brown story later. Teaser.
We will.
Yeah.
So it was a natural progression to go into journalism. And at the time that I attended school at Pitt and Johnstown, it was just newspaper broadcast, all these new terms, and who knew it, right?
Right.
And so it was a time in the 90s when it was like, well, you sink or swim again, and which are you going? I went newspaper and worked for the Tribune Review for a lot of years. Well, actually, I worked for the Swickley Herald first as a sports reporter, and then went to the Tribune Review. From there, I wrote a foreword for a book the guy's last name is Lesh. He was with Goldmine magazine that used to do all the music interviews.
Sure.
And I wrote a couple of forewords for some of the musicians, like Freddie Johnson from the Marcells and things like that, just to kind of keep my hand in it.
Okay.
And then when I realized there was no money in journalism, I kind of did other things and figured out marketing. So left and was a mom, stay-at-home mom, but was able to write, and kind of freelance off and on for a bunch of years. When I turned 40, I decided that I needed to go back into the industry and figure it out. So I was hired by Markowitz Communications, which was a small PR marketing firm, and figured out that now that line that was divided between marketing and PR in the media world was now blurred, and everything was sort of this crazy cluster of everything. And I felt old, because who knew that that's what this had become? I didn't even know what a podcast was. Right. So I met John from this firm where he was on the list of people whom I had to ascertain to come to our events. And I met him, and I was, the funniest story is, I don't think we've ever told this part. So there were only 3 people who I worked with, and they were like, oh, wait until you meet John Chamberlin. You're going to love him, love John Chamberlin. And I was like, oh, this is great. This has been this great job. Can't wait to meet this guy. So I go to the circus which we were putting, it was our PR event, and John was there. And John, now knowing him, X amount of years later, he's on his phone and he's, hi. So he cannot be bothered, and
oh, really?
Does not want to talk at all to me, which he says is a different story. But he ends up saying later, like, I don't even remember meeting you there. So I was very #non-impressionable is what you'll hear me say to him. So I go back to the office and I say to the other girl, man, not impressed by this John Chamberlin guy, not friendly, not nice, it is what it is. Then I met him a little bit later, and then somehow he remembered, and we had a great, what he considers the first meeting. And so we hit it off and had this like mind immediately.
Okay.
And we were like, hey, let's do this. I think one of the first things we talked about was during the Pittsburgh Bicentennial that I was working on. We did the porte-cochere at
the Christmas
tree delivery.
Christmas tree up at the mayor's the city
porch.
county building. Yeah.
And that was one of the first things we worked on together. And it was like, this is silly and this is fun. We could do this. Fast forward, I left there and went on my own. And I told the story that he continued to send me jobs. And I was like, do you get it that I'm going on my own? Like, I don't want to go to a company. I got a taste of what it's like, and I want to do my own thing. Bounced ideas off of each other. I had 2 marketing clients by the end of 6 months. He had a bunch of EMS clients. And now here we are 4 years later with about 15 clients together. So we're very fortunate. We were just saying today, we love working together. It's a great chemistry.
It's a great dynamic between the two of you.
Yeah. And we really only have known each other 5 years.
Yeah.
Total.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And I have had partners in other things, and I just have never clicked with someone. Mm-hmm. And again, to get someone, podcasting and building whatever this was going to be was really, obviously celebrities had large podcasts or whatever, there's Gary Vaynerchuk or whatever. I mean, who's going to build this? Who understands it? But she understood it before I even understood it, because she would say, I'd like to be a part of this at some point. And I'd be like, God, don't attach your trailer to my hitch, because like, I don't even know where this is going. I'm just a crazy person. and she was offended at that point.
I was.
She was going, oh, okay. Well, but I was trying to tell her, like, I don't know where this is going.
Sure.
But quite honestly, we just had the discussion about 2 months ago, and it hits you in that I'm not necessarily sure that we're barn burners, but we are in sort of a blue ocean strategy where we created a blog, a podcast. Because of the success of the podcast and the social media associated with it, people started to come to us and say, hey, can you help me with my marketing?
Right.
In the meantime, we already had marketing experience. So it's like this circle. Now we help people with their marketing. We get them on the podcast. Because if we can PR your event and none of the news stations or radio stations pick it up, well, we have this vehicle called the YaJagoff podcast, and if it fits into the podcast, we'd like to have you on. And while the news might show a 30-second clip of your event, we're going to come to your event, make videos from it, and have you on the podcast to talk 10 minutes about it, whatever your cause is. Right. Again, we're not some large following like a large radio station or TV station, but we have that channel for distribution. So again, I don't know that we always joke we do not have a business plan, but our business is well planned at this point, because the way it's occurring, I don't know that we could have said, let's start a podcast and try to get clients and do marketing for them. I don't know that anybody would have ever thought of that. You know, I certainly wasn't, but now that's what it has become. And it's become this thing that we've had to learn as entrepreneurs now to learn how to scale. Because while we're here making your podcast, we have clients that have needs.
Right.
And so we have to make sure that we have staff and team members to take care of those things while we're here.
Right.
So it's kind of working out, and and we're learning now how to scale it. But one interesting note, I was going to say, the story we always like to tell about the word YaJagoff. So we kept, for a long time, I didn't even have it on my LinkedIn profile. I was like, I don't know what that's going to do to it, you know?
So, might be a little abrasive,
yeah,
right?
you don't know, right? But one day,
it's too long of an explanation.
right? And one day we just said, let's just do it, right? And so we called our one EMS client, and they're in Minnesota and Houston. So we said, look, we're going to stop using the term YJ Media, and you're going to see emails from us that say John at YaJagoff and Rachel at YaJagoff. And they're like, it was like total silence. And we thought, oh God. And then the guy, they just started chuckling. He goes, I love it. And we said, well, there you have it.
But the turn to that is.
But the turn to that, some local clients will say, they're a little concerned about it, so they will say, well, YJ Media does our marketing. Yeah. So, yeah, they get a little
definitely
nervous
trust
about it,
in us and the brand, but are still like just a little skittish.
Yeah,
you know
about being associated.
So, because there is such a tagline that goes along with the word Jagoff, right? So
But what is the tagline?
Right. Well,
we don't know. Can you articulate?
Well,
yes.
yeah,
we say, my shtick, and this goes back to what I was saying even about listen. I didn't know what a podcast was. I got that prejudged two dudes doing a podcast. Oh, it must be this, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, it's not. Squash that. Now you move on. What's the word Jagoff? You can debate it. Even the media has debated it, from the Trump stuff and the whatever. But we look at it as all-encompassing, or I say umbrella, of Pittsburgh. It's the word that identifies Pittsburgh,
right.
and that's what we are.
Right.
And so it becomes sometimes more difficult for us to prove ourselves, because you do get that original stigma of being a yinzer. So being a female, because we overthink everything, I come out of the gate saying we're a Pittsburgh umbrella, we aren't yinzers, we articulate, we before you even need to have a conversation with me.
Got it.
So we made it a little harder on ourselves because of the term, but it's also unique enough that if you know us, they go, those son of a bees are quirky. That's what makes, you know what I mean? So even my children, my daughter, like we joke all the time, my 11-year-old loves the fact that that's the one word that's kind of not right. She'll go, John, you are such a Jagoff. And she says it.
She'll enunciate it.
Oh, yeah. She has right intonation of it, everything. Yeah.
Perfectly,
she does well.
Yeah. So, I think it's a double-edged sword. But again, where we are fortunate is that we've made a mark. We've proven ourselves as far as our creativity and our ability. Mm-hmm. And from that, from a marketing standpoint, from that, they they then go, we heard you have a podcast. Or, we've been fortunate enough lately to have guest hosted on, because we are entercommonradio.com on the Bubba Show.
I saw that.
And so...
How'd that go?
It was great,
We love it. Yeah.
it's just kind of, it teaches you too to think on your feet. You have to figure out how to speak in a conversation without, having to get nixed. There's not an edit button,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it's I just go back to it's crazy what it's become, and we're very fortunate because I looked at myself as never coming out of the corporate world and knowing when I was laid off that I could have easily picked up the phone, not because I'm a champ or great at anything, just I could have picked up the phone and had enough people, solicit for me to get a job working in a cubicle somewhere.
Right.
And if that's your thing, that's your thing. God bless you. We need people to work in cubicles, but I could never see me going back there to that world unless I really had to. But thankfully, what it's become has, people say, well, you monetized your podcast. I'm not sure that we did, but we have certainly monetized the podcast because there are sponsors. But in the meantime, we've monetized our lives of what we're doing.
Yeah, you've enhanced your brand.
No doubt about it. Yeah, we've certainly monetized the brand.
Yeah.
Yes.
And from an outsider's view in, you've taken that brand and created an entity that's multifaceted.
Yes.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. Right. And I go back and I think, the Catholic schoolgirl mom was, honestly, like, is this what I saw is what I wanted to do?
Right.
This mom who went, talk to me now kind of thing, 100%. Right. Because, the number one question we're asked from other podcasters, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, is how did you monetize? We were even on, I forget where we were, that we were like, they're trying to figure out how we monetize this. Who wouldn't want to pick brains?
Content.
Right. That's it. You understand that?
Yes.
But there's a lot of people who don't. And sometimes, you get down on, and you're like, wow, I don't want people to feel like, oh, they monetize, so they think they're better. Not at all. There were sleepless nights. Then you kind of pull yourself up and you're like, you have no idea how much time, energy, effort went into that, because both of us are similar in the sense that we are never going to, one, burn a bridge, or two, expect something from a friend or ruin a relationship because of a favor. So favors are something that you cherish, and they're not even something that you use, right? And so the last thing we wanted was to use our contacts and say, hey, can you get us here? Instead, we proved.
Right.
And now we've been fortunate to say, hey, we kind of help each other. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, and I love the fact that, our brand has become, Rachel's term that she used is quirky at this point. When she was at Markowitz and they would invite me to go to see the mayor cut the ribbon at Nova Place. The mayor was fortunate enough that we played in the same hockey league together, so he kind of knew, whatever. But I would say, all right, Mayor, we have 4 questions for you. 3 are real ones, we would give 3. Then the 4th one would be like, so we heard there's a little bit of, payback going on here. We heard that you convinced Nova Place by making sure that all the employees get free Gus and Yaya's snowballs, ice balls, or whatever. And he would know that it would be lighthearted, and it's not really going to be, and it's not trying to pin him down or anything like that. So the good news is through that, people learned that we liked to play. And so when we go to the Cultural Trust, who calls and asks, can we interview these people or those people, they know that we're going to get the content out, but we're also going to have a little bit of a light spin on it, but it's never going to be negative.
A little tinge of comedy.
Yeah. But sometimes it's too much. Like, we've noticed that sometimes we go into an extreme, right? So Wahlburgers is one of our clients.
Right.
And one of the guys from Wahlburgers will say, okay, wait, now you're going a little too far. Stop here and simplify. And it's true. You need that. You need someone to say, or even our retirement facility people, the common, she coined the term, Rachel, go back in the box. I appreciate that you're out of the box. Get back in, because you're going a little
And we
overboard.
warn people like that. We'll say, we'll come to you and throw 27 things at you. And if
Sometimes
you need to
it
tell
works.
us to shut up, we'll shut up. But in the meantime, hopefully out of those 27, 2 of those stick, and we say, hey, that this will work, or at least let's try this. Let's try something new, and that's what we've been all about. Quite frankly, is just trying something new. When Earth Day came around, look, Pittsburgh Dad owns a position in the market. You cannot beat that. And what blogger, podcaster, video content person wouldn't want that position?
Sure.
And so we said, how do we differentiate from that? So at one point, we were asked to create assets for Pittsburgh Earth Day,
right?
And this is a good example of just basically we Yinzerize it, but we didn't try to copy what Pittsburgh Dad does.
Right.
So we made these slates that you would to put up on social media that said, Earth Day, it's Earth Day. Turn off all of your lights, of course, except for the one that shows on your Jack Lambert jersey hanging over your man. Who would ever turn that off, right? So those are the kind of things that we do that are kind of quirky. And so it's cool that we kind of use the phrase that we're second in on marketing companies. We don't really compete with other marketing companies because we ask them or they ask us to come in and maybe help, throw out some things for a brand. And so we don't compete with them. We like working with most of the marketing companies because it's a warm lead at that point. And as long as we're not interested in stealing the lead, right? When we're not, we just want to have some fun.
Well, there's so much open ground out there.
No doubt.
The creativity pot is pretty much still empty, I think. It needs to be filled. So as long as you're dancing in a respectful way in there and creating new content and you're respectful to who else, your first movers, you're respectful to them, what's the harm?
Yeah.
It's going to actually work.
For sure.
In most instances.
Yeah.
Yep,
absolutely.
And
it's a great term, respectful. Yeah.
Well, and I think there's so much. This is the new media. Would you not agree? I love it because the guests can come in here, and I've had Craig Gass was a national comedian that came in extremely irreverent, made me a little uncomfortable even listening to it because, I knew what I was going to get. So, but it's authentic here. My guests speak their mind. They say what they want to say, and we're not. How would I put this? We're not regulated.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Right.
Not yet. But I do a small radio show once a week in Beaver for real estate on Saturday on 99.3. There, I can't truly be exactly how I'd like to be.
Yeah.
Sure.
You understood that when you were on the air the other day. You really can't go full. You probably couldn't go full Jagoff.
Yeah.
If you wanted to.
Well,
am I right?
No, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, I think two things. So I think me, again, coming from I came from traditional newspaper, so I knew what those regulations were. And you were really in the 90s, early 2000s, there were so many more regulations than now. When I look at journalism and media now, it disappoints me traditionally because, I was taught that you don't put your opinion. You don't insert it, By the same token, the freedom of having a podcast to be able to say, if done tastefully, this is what I think, and there's actual substance behind it, then yes. So I always tell the story that Bobby Cherry, a very good friend of ours, who now runs the Insider. Is that what it's?
Inside Pittsburgh.
Inside Pittsburgh. He was all, with Hearst. He was with Swickley Herald. He was with the Trib, and great journalist. He said to us, "Listen, the Golden Quills now have a category for podcasts. You guys would be great for it." We entered and we were finalists.
It's amazing. Congratulations.
Right? Thanks.
Thanks.
But in all the years I was in newspaper, not one of my stupid headline stories got any mention. I do this podcast and it gets it. So to your point, yes. Now, were you going to talk about Melanie?
Yes, exactly.
When we were on the Bubba show, Melanie, you see that frantic need to get 400 things done in the matter of a minute and a half. And I'm watching her. I'm sweating. It's not menopause. I'm watching her push buttons to make sure that she's in at like a minute 8 or whatever it was that she had to get to. And every time we go in there, without fail, she goes, "Guys, I know you know what you're doing, but please make sure you don't swear." Because it is true. We have that editing opportunity, and that's not always the case.
Yeah, and we've had traditional media folks say what you said. They used to be on the radio and allowed to say and have time to talk. Have 7 minutes to do with this or do that. And now it's all very cut and dry. You have a minute and a half to do this, a minute and a half to do that, and then 30 seconds to do this. So they say, we'd like to come on your podcast because we get to talk for once.
Yeah, and that is it. And it's amazing as a sports fan. I listen to 93.7 The Fan. Love the show. Paul Alexander is on there occasionally. I'm friends with a lot of the folks on there. But I hate the station. I hate it because everything. Ron Cook is one of my favorite people in Pittsburgh when it comes to sports. I love to hear Ron talk and pontificate. I feel Ron is constantly handcuffed because before he can get into the explanation of something, they're off to a commercial. There's so much commercial and sports headlines, and everything is so tight. And to get a guest on there and have them extrapolate, it's almost like a tease. You never get everything as a sports fan, I think. And I'm not blaming anybody. It's just the culture of radio today. To keep the doors open, they need the revenue. But boy, it's tight. It's really contrived. And sometimes it comes off as contrived, I think.
Yes. And, I could go back and forth and debate. And I love the fact that, again, we try to use the podcast as, you said the word vehicle, right? And so it's more of a vehicle to tell stories, because that's at most. Because look at how Pittsburgh's growing.
Right.
We could take any topic and kind of go wherever we want to go with it. And again, we're allowed. But we're also getting into this, which we can talk about another time, but even like the nonprofit kind of stuff.
Are we getting invited back?
I hope.
Good. That's awesome.
I hope. That was sly.
Yes.
But
remember, we're long form conversation, so we can cover that today, too.
I'm a closer.
She's a closer.
No, but I do look at traditional. I look at the media, and sometimes it's up for debate. It's definitely disappointing on certain ends, where you're thinking, man, you didn't give that voice. You did not give the voice that you could. At least if you want to give your opinion, and this is the old school journalism in me. If you want to give your opinion, and that's okay now, which is fine, at least show the other side, because that's what telling a story is all about, not it being what you want to say only, And I'll tell you, the only time at least that I can think of, that we've really ever had a problem, that I'm going to say is a problem, was recently when we did have a sensitive subject nonprofit. Come on, you following me? And they wanted to basically seek revenge on someone. And we didn't see it coming. And you know how you pride yourself, as speakers, right? We pride ourselves on, I know where this is going. Neither of us saw it coming.
Really?
And it was done before it could be done. And I sort of went female to female, and I thought, I'm changing the way this conversation's going now. So I feel I took away some of her ability that I would not have done had she not done it that way, right? Is that how you see it?
And I think, to sum that up, we're not opposed to doing something serious. We've done serious topics.
Right.
And we're not forcing anybody to come in and juggle or laugh and yuck it up about, whatever it is, suicide or death or anything like that. But we are about lighthearted. But the one thing, we had to edit ourselves at that point, because it was a discussion that was going so dark that it was too personal, that we edited it, because it was not something that any other person than that person listening to it would have enjoyed the conversation. It wasn't pertinent to anybody else.
Understood.
So and
we're all about awareness, especially if we don't know. You want to create awareness because we don't know, and there's things that have interested me that I had no idea would ever interest me.
Yeah.
But then there's times that I say I'm interested and I'm not, and you'll know it.
She's looking off to the side.
But to your point, though, two things. Probably journalism, as you were taught, and as you worked earlier in your career, does not exist anymore, in my opinion.
No,
as a consumer. The other, and consequently, on the bigger picture, I'm not sure that news even exists anymore. Because depending on what channel you watch, even locally, which some channels have a certain slant based on their parent company, it's almost, and I don't think this is healthy, and I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but I think the consumer chooses the station that's going to give them the news in the slant that they want to hear.
Right.
And then it just continues.
It's crazy.
It continues the downward slide of someone not being interested in hearing an opposing view.
Yep.
Right.
Because you just keep feeding off the things you want to hear.
Yes,
this is right, and it makes you so closed-minded that you don't want to hear the other person's side.
We say the only thing we truly stay away from, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, is politics, because there's just no need for it. And to be honest with you, I would have absolutely no problem to sit here with someone who has completely different views and listen to why. It might fire me up, but you will never, ever get me to say, I am mad about that. Because I want to hear your reasoning so that I can have a balanced mind. That's the end, right?
I figure you're a smart. When I look at someone who's a smart person who has an opposing view, I say first, they're a smart person, right? Yeah. So somehow they're taking in information that's completely different from me, and they're processing this as a smart person to make this opinion. I want to know why.
Absolutely right. Because maybe you missed something.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
You know,
that's it.
My decision on over the years has been changed. That's part of growing as a person.
Sure.
You hear a better view on something, or maybe you understand something differently.
Yes.
We don't do politics on this show. We do everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, everything
it's
else,
just
but
not
we
worth
just don't.
It. Yeah.
Want a politician to come on and have some fun with us? We're up for that.
Yeah.
And we do, the other thing we don't do is sports, right? Because there are so many people that do sports, right? But we love sports, and sports is certainly a part of the culture of Pittsburgh. But when we have a chance to have Franco Harris on, we had him sing a Christmas song. Right. It wasn't, and certainly we have to talk about the Immaculate Reception, but
of course.
And
remember when you said conception? Yeah.
Speaking of mistakes,
he didn't know about that.
The Immaculate
Reception.
I think there might be a religious bend to that somewhere.
Yeah, I did do that. Oh my God, yeah. But again, we love to have sports people involved.
Sure.
But we want to have them involved in our way, as long as they'll play the way we want to play.
And that's your differentiator.
Yeah.
That's and I think that
it's more difficult too.
It is more
difficult. The easy
difficult.
route is to talk about his catch or his throw or his pass or his run. You know.
And you have a challenge of staying relevant in what's going on now, but taking it from a different angle and not jumping into the sports element of it.
Correct.
Using their personality and their belovedness in the town generally, and then working your angle to make it work and still be current. See. Yeah. That's a challenge.
Correct.
That's a challenge. Yeah. For sure.
And we do it. So we have been I guess we can even talk about before Honda was our sponsor. It was Total Sports Enterprises, and they were my first client. I had this great relationship with them. We still have a great relationship with them, but the road they were taking was more auction-based, to be perfectly honest, and we were focused on our marketing. And so we decided it was no longer a fit. That's really the story. And so never, ever discredit the fact that they were our first sponsors. Our biggest concern at that time was that we were going to go from this, branded Pittsburgh thing to a sports podcast. And we did have a couple of our listeners say, it was getting kind of sportsy because we were having them on often. Now, was it awesome to have James Conner, even though we were able to do that balance?
Right.
Yes, it was fantastic. But if you have too much of it, because the marketing starts to kind of water it down, you get labeled. And I think it was a blessing in disguise that we did that, because it did take us away from it.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It made us go back to just, again, if we're lucky if we get a sports personality on that's popular, but we also know that we don't have to have that in order to have someone listen to the podcast.
Or for credibility,
I always talk about street cred. Rachel always talk about how we are event-based. So an example is last year we did our podcast for Valentine's Day. We brought in 3 couples that are TV, radio personalities, and had them do like a newlywed game. Like, how much you know. We did a live show, recorded it as the podcast. Okay. And interesting enough, Christy Nolan, who's part of the Arcade Theater ownership there, I said, look, we want to do this, but we're waiting for this. And she kept saying, you don't need to wait for the mayor of Pittsburgh to say he'll come. You don't need to wait for this. You guys have your own brand, and people will come because of your brand.
Amen.
And again,
Amen.
it's our modesty, humility, or something. It sounds almost pompous to say that, but our almost not belief in our brand. That
you're always the last to know.
Yeah, I
think
that's
the
right.
last to know. I mean,
And I think we are humble people, and we're just, we try to just be normal. But it's cool when she says, look, you don't need these iconic people to come and do a show here. You'll be fine. And so we panic. And we can't eat, we can't drink, we can't sleep. Oh, my God, there's only 10 tickets sold. And suddenly there's a house full of people there to come see the show, which is cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, right. And that's just one example. But then, I started, where I was going even with the Total Sports thing was, we met Santonio Holmes through that. And he would have been the last person, he hadn't been in Pittsburgh. And I really had no...
the bowling event, right?
The bowling event.
Right.
But, this was our 3rd year. So our first year, I think he was doing a signing with Total Sports is how we even met him. But basically, he said, I have this, his son carries he carries the sickle cell trait.
Right.
His son has
Right.
sickle cell. And again, back to the awareness, it was important to him that he get the message across that this is not just an African-American disease,
Sure.
And so year one, we, did what we could to make it work. Brett Kiesel came, which was amazing because that was another aha moment. Because athletes, God love them, especially Santonio has obviously become a friend. He's busy, right? And so the biggest thing is how many Steelers can you bring? And they're busy. You don't know what's going to happen. So that night we were like, we don't know who the hell's coming. And so the doors open and like Brett Kiesel's beard, came walking in. It was like, like the churches, church bells. And all of a sudden the TV stations came afterward. And it was like, how on God's green earth did this happen for us? And we were very fortunate.
It's amazing. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, I think we sold 10 lanes. It was nothing crazy. Mm-hmm. And by year 3, we've tripled and we've sold 36 of the 40 lanes at this point. And it's a great thing because people know now what his message is. And it's so rewarding to know that it's now become part of our message, So another example that sports, has kind of carried on relevance.
Yeah. And following up on what you said, again, the Total Sports Enterprises, we will never denounce. I mean, they were the first. They gave the podcast street cred again.
Right.
They were willing to step up and say, through, Rachel takes people into back halls and duct tapes them to chairs and punches them in the face and threatens them.
Do I?
She's a closer. She's a closer. No, but I mean, she has a way to twist your arm into thinking that this is a good thing, and it was a good thing. Quite frankly, it wasn't like she was BSing them. But the fact is, she convinced them that look, you don't have the money to go buy on a WDVE. You don't have the money to go. But you can get on this podcast that has a decent, loyal following.
Right. And growing.
Right. And so, yes. And so the minute that happened, the podcast, started to grow just because, wow, other podcasters say, wow, they actually have a sponsor. We went and did this, and then it grew from there. And again, getting those interviews was fantastic because we had access to those people backstage. And they started to, for Juju Smith-Schuster to walk up and go, it's the cool mom. He looks at her and he goes, oh, it's cool mom. Because
I made him say that.
So it's great because that's the kind of rapport we started to build with them. And, we were very, very lucky.
Yeah, we were lucky.
What was, give me an aha moment where something, maybe it's that event, I don't know, but something in the creation of this, maybe early on for you, where you was like, wow, something is happening here. Or, wow, this is actually kind of working. Do you remember anything stick out to you?
I've honestly, not to sound like the hokey mom, but
it's all right.
These last 6 months, it's truly, we've been so lucky. And I think being mature, we'll say not old, mature, we're able to look back and see the hardships and how we've been able to overcome them and never think separately, but similar stories, right? And look back and say, who would have thought, and not without hard work. But I think the most recent things have been the successes, the relationships that we're building in general. Right. I mean, there are a couple, I think, yes, the Santonio event, when we looked at all those lanes being filled, I forgot about the theater that we thought we had 10 tickets sold and it was standing room only. My group of hockey mom friends will say they're our biggest supporters. He will tell you that. If we are dead in the water, those bitches are showing up and we're so lucky, And so
that's awesome.
It's a true story, right?
That's awesome.
And we just did an event actually that was not, it was a YaJagoff event, but it was to benefit my son going away to the World's Tournament in 2020.
Okay.
And so we just used the old Allegheny Inn, which was the 1010 space. It's a bed and breakfast across from Allegheny General Hospital. And we did Let's Make a Deal. So what we do is we get these crazy ideas, and instead of putting them to the public and trying them on our marketing clients, we test them on our hockey organizations to see how they'll work.
Okay.
So, right?
Yeah.
So we were like, oh, we want to play Let's Make a Deal. We'll make it a hockey event.
That's a good plan.
And I'll tell you what, we did not know. You go to these Facebook events and you're like, well, we could have 4 people or 400 people.
Right.
You have no clue what to expect.
Right.
So Obviously, budgeting is the hardest part, but essentially we said, let's do bare minimum. Every family involved who's going overseas, pitch in X, and we'll get beer and wine, and we'll figure it out from there. And the line assembled that night out and around the corner, and they just kept coming in. And we looked and said, we are so lucky that this happened. We ended up making $2,500 on a party that was, $20 a person.
And it was like 3 hours.
Wow.
Who does that?
It's crazy.
I mean, and it was...
It's good.
And I'm not saying who does that in a pompous way. I'm saying it like, wow, am I thankful? Because we look back and go, you just don't know. I think our biggest asset is we trust each other. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of one of those things where if I know that I'm nervous, he's not. Or if he thinks that something's not going to go well, I'm like, we got this. You know, so somehow that balance definitely
Well, your
works
trust in each other
out.
probably gets you past any worries about not having like an exact concrete plan.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's the fun of this, right?
Because
Sure.
I think part of the plan, though, has been what's been laid before. You know, you're a physician. What do they say? They're not paid for what they're doing today. You're paid for all the experiences they've had before they operate on your hip or your knee, and that's the experience you want. And all of the experiences that we've had leading up to this, either together or individually, have allowed us to have that faith in each other, or that kind of thing. Yeah.
How'd you guys, gals? How'd you get connected with Talent Network?
John?
Oh, yeah. Well, basically, they had the Jimmy Crenn podcast when Jimmy was off the air. They had the Jimmy Crenn podcast when this Jason Falls said, you should start a podcast. I thought, I don't know anything about starting a podcast. And they had a studio there. And they said, well, why don't you come and use the studio and do this? And we did one or two. And that's basically, we would go every Saturday morning to a studio and do a podcast. And it was fun, show up, there's donuts, everybody's all the guests were coming in. It was like fun. We'd make these
cool...
This
in Moon Township at their office?
Yeah, right there at their office. And it was fun because it was cool. Then one point happened where we started to go out. We wanted to do a podcast on that Party Peddler out in Pittsburgh where people drinking. And then we wanted to take comedians on the Segways and do a podcast as we stopped. And we started to get out more and more and think, this is fun. And this helps build the audience.
No
and then the cool thing is that AR, after Rachel, she's like, this is fantastic. Let's start doing events. And we liked going to the Three Rivers Arts Festival. We liked going to the Regatta and being on site and having the branding there.
We used to like being at the Regatta.
Right.
Yeah. How about that, huh?
Yeah. And they were a client, and but then the advent of portable equipment, reliable portable equipment, allowed us to just continue to do that. And we thought nothing against the studio because God knows, look at what you have here, and it's nice to have a base of operations. But we just love the thrill of trying to make it work, whether we're sitting on a park bench or in the middle of Market Square, wherever that is, of trying to make that podcast happen.
And it's part of the equation, right?
Yeah,
and so
the essence of your show is
it's
Pittsburgh,
experiential.
and the people and experiences there. You need to be on the ground doing that.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It's experiential. Like we did Doors Open Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah.
So we walked around to 4 different facilities in Pittsburgh and interviewed people to talk about the church, talk about, and that was all part of the podcast. And we don't do a lot of video, but the pictures themselves help tell the story, help build that experience of, wow, I didn't know that about that particular Episcopal church in Pittsburgh.
It's the story. Yeah, it's that equation of the story where that who, what, when, where, why, being for us, being in a, and we, anytime we've spoken with other podcasters, we've said everyone is different. What works for one doesn't work for another.
Sure. Our formats are different.
Right. But for us, if we're going to tell the story and use imagery, well, then be there because it's already going to be after the fact. So this is going to add that element, right?
No
so that's
question.
why Facebook Live became important because if we are like we did the Day of the Dead with the city paper, right? Well, by the time the podcast came out, it was done. And who gave a crap about the Day of the Dead because we're already on to November 3rd or whatever it was. And so being there and having that imagery that day and then reflecting back on the fact that this tradition lives on made sense.
Well, it's very authenticity is there when you're there.
Sure.
Yeah,
right.
When you're on site. And again, I'm speaking because I know that's not what this show is going to be. This show is about she's about the studio, and the deep dive into the guest.
Yeah.
But it's different. But both can work. They're both just different.
Right.
But there's something really authentic and really cool about what you're doing. You're being there.
Yeah, thank you.
Having and Facebook Live, as you mentioned, or maybe YouTube Live. I guess YouTube's got a service now.
Yeah.
I don't pretend to understand YouTube. It's extremely difficult to maneuver. Facebook, I figured out.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond being a reporter, right? To speak about your journalism background. This is so much more than that. Would you not agree?
So much more. Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, and again, kudos to John, because my skewed view, life is experiences, right? And so I looked at even the newspaper business as I never would have thought. The Post-Gazette was the newspaper. Mm-hmm. The fact that I even was with the Tribune Review was crazy because, let's face it, that we weren't a 2-newspaper town for how long?
Right.
So I was with the other paper. But those experiences were so amazing because look at how many people we've run in. Rob Rossi, prime example. Mm-hmm. He's a dear friend of the podcast. Right. Rob calls and says, hey, why don't you guys interview me? Because we were looking to talk to him about the Malkin story he did. He said, just come to the Penguins practice. That's the kind of stuff that we've had access to that I never would have thought. So I think it starts with journalism and then it goes to the sky is the limit. And I think it did help us visually to say, how do we create this whole package? Because we don't have to stop at this, and we still have people say, well, with your job being a podcaster, I wish my job was a podcaster because that would make my life a lot easier,
Certainly.
But
Certainly.
The marketing is our bread and butter, but it makes you never become complacent. Mm-hmm. I don't think we don't have the personalities to ever just be okay with where we are.
Right.
But I think knowing what we've been able to accomplish and what else is there has pushed us to go to the next level, especially again at our ages, because let's face it, we're not these up and comers, who get all of this new technology. We had to really figure it all out so that we could see what else is out there.
Do you have more plans for video? To incorporate more video?
No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have to, really. And that's where...
Outside of this masterpiece today.
Yeah. This is amazing.
It is
amazing. This is like...
Thank you.
is like most men go to Home Depot and go, this gets it going, right? But I think, we do have interest in... We have to do more video because we have blurred the lines in that we'll always hear people say, we watched your podcast.
Drives us crazy.
But you haven't watched the podcast because we do, but however, we have we blurred the lines by we do a quick video that says, hi, I'm John Chamberlin. I was on the YaJagoff podcast, and this is what you'll hear me talk about. In the meantime, we also do our jagging around with John and Rachel videos.
Yeah, which are very good, by the way.
Thank you. And we try to keep those short, but they're not the podcast. They're videos. So we are blurring the line a bit. But I want to just go back to the aha moment. Because
you had time to think. I mean, I spoke for 5 minutes.
Well, I didn't think you were ever going to be quiet.
I'm done.
It was great content.
Thank you. Jackass.
Great content.
I always talk about our aha moment was when we were in this business, just kind of the mucking and grinding of the day, and we got asked to be on a business podcast, Mass Solutions podcast.
Very cool.
And we sat there. That was and I get goosebumps thinking about it. I'm not kidding. That was the first time we ever told our story about how we got together.
Right.
And it was like, holy crap, this is actually working, and realize
that was our business plan.
And then I've always been a thing where, there is luck. Everybody is successful because there's some element of luck. Mm-hmm. Even if you're an Olympian, there's some element of luck that, but hard work got you in place to take advantage of the luck when somebody opened up the door.
Right.
And so that's where now the aha moment. So that was my first aha moment. But the aha moment, as you said, this last 6 months where, as you know from real estate, it's the slow burn, right? Mm-hmm. It's building all those relationships.
Is.
You don't know which one's going to walk through the door tomorrow. All of a sudden, all of it's culminating in the last 6 months. We're going, why did we make so many friends? Because now they're all calling, and it's cool because they're all calling with respectful calls and asks for help, and it's actually, so that's the second aha moment. But yeah, you remember we did that, and I just sat there thinking, wow, this is crazy. We're telling this story. We've never sat and talked about this particular story like you and when you first opened up. How did you two get together? Yep. We never sat and planned how we were going to get there.
I love that.
Never.
I love
and to this day, we
that.
joke, my husband will say he works in a union job, and so you never know, like he could be home at 2 p.m, or he could be home, at 10 at night.
Sure.
And when he's home and he hears us, like, I'll glance over and he's like, you know, rolling his eyes, or he'll say, I don't know how you guys make money. Like, he will just blatantly put it out there. You know, or we had my 16-year-old yesterday for a chaotic, you know, endeavor. And he's like, Mom, do you hear that you just said to John? I said, John, I didn't bring my wallet and he needs to eat. Can we stop at Subway? And he's like, Mom, do you hear yourself? Like, you are just throwing poor John in there. Like, I'm like, well, you know, we need to do this. We need to get this done. But, you know, yeah, you look at those, we're looking at a point now where it's scary, but I look at it as when I was growing up, I hated when people would say, are you a singer? Well, just because my dad's do I ask you if you're a dentist because your dad's a dentist?
Labeling.
You know, it drove me crazy. But again, going back, I think it helped me realize, who would have thought this would become an art form in some way, right? And I'm a traditionalist to a point, but it is an art form because it's something that not everyone can do. Not everyone can have that conversation. It is exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. And do you feel, you're obviously early adopters. I feel anyone in the sphere right now, in the space, that's the kitschy word to the youngsters, in the space, is an early adopter, because I don't think what this is ultimately going to become is even remotely defined yet.
Right.
I mean, hopefully the government stays out of it, but generally speaking, it could look completely different 5 years from now.
Yeah.
But do you feel like an early adopter? You are making it up a lot as you go along. And did you feel that way, or are you getting more comfortable now?
I don't think we did. I think certain people have helped us see it. You know, like John will say, you know, when we're all low on ourselves, he'll say, for instance, Natalie Benzavanga from the Post-Gazette called or texted me the other day and said, hey, could you go speak at Chatham about digital marketing and the effects of digital marketing from a journalistic standpoint? And I was like, me? You know, and so he was like, well, why wouldn't she ask you? And that's great, but he's like that person that goes, well, of course you're good at your job. You know, so to hear it, that's my John impression. So to hear it from, it is a good role, but to hear it from a Natalie, who is, you know, a decade younger and gets it. And
very dynamic one.
Sure. You know, to me, then yes, you start to say, oh, but I think we're humble enough and we're realistic enough to say it could be taken away like that. And so we realize, again, going back from a marketing standpoint, the hustle and the work ethic is what's going to make us thrive. But we could be stripped of it, because if the economy crashes, what's the first thing to go? Marketing.
Absolutely. So
we get that. So there's a reality check that we say, you know, even with our team, we've surrounded ourselves. We have about 6 people now, right, who are with us. And that's great. But there's that panic sometimes where you go, okay, if this client leaves, we then have to restructure. And what do you do? Because there's a comfort zone. So how much can we handle, you know, and back to the balance. I have 3 children, and now I'm on the school board, and I have hockey, and I have a husband, and I have, you know, this company. And it's that think through and that figure out and that trust, because sometimes we have that brain that I'm not even saying what I need him to do, and he's doing it. And that's the part that I think we're super lucky. And that's why the aha moments keep coming. That's the synergy between the two of you. No doubt.
Yeah, it's incredible. Again,
everyone thinks we've known each other for either we're brother and sister, we're married, we've heard it all. Or how many years have you guys been doing this? And we're like, together 3. Right. You know, but we've known each other. It's crazy. That's exciting. Yeah. Especially, I can share one emotion with you, and that's not knowing exactly what's going to look like a month from now. When I started this, the guests were few. I had to reach out to people that I was uncomfortable reaching out to, because what they're going to talk to me for. And as we started to get legs, you know, then the appointments started to come. So I kind of know what the next month looks like, but really beyond that 4 weeks, I have no clue. I might have no one to talk to. I don't know, but it's exciting though to me. The unknown doesn't bother me. I look at it more as almost an excitable thing for my.
But what you're doing is exactly what I understand you're supposed to do. Because really, what are the rules? You know, people will tell you, post on Facebook at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, because that's when you don't know. No. You don't know that I work nights or days, whatever, you know, that kind of thing. Right. But I think what you're doing is you're doing out of a passion for doing it. if it becomes monetized, that's great. But on the other hand, if it doesn't, you're still doing it. You're passionate about the work.
Absolutely.
You're not just doing this to say, you didn't turn on the microphone and say, oh, I need to make a buck today.
Right. Correct.
And
Correct.
But the passion does lead to monetization if you stay passionate versus trying to monetize.
Yeah.
Bloggers,
Yeah.
website hosts, website whatever, podcasters, they're all the same, right? We're all, you get in there, you don't write a blog because you want to make money.
Right.
You write a blog because you want to air out your whatever it is you're talking
the
about.
passion has to supersede the financial
doubt about
correction.
it, yeah.
You can't explain that to someone that really thinks it's going to be a business.
Yep.
Right.
And that's okay, but that's not how this sphere seems to work.
Your previous business, right? Music, right? If you're going to play, you could learn to play guitar.
Right.
You could say, I want to be the lead guitarist in a big band someday. But if that's nice to have as a goal.
Yeah.
But if you sit there and say, I want to be passionate and the best guitar player ever,
Right.
that leads you to something
question.
else, right?
No
a different path. Yeah. That's
Two
crazy.
questions before we wrap this up.
Okay.
First is not a question. You had my good friends Shelly and Sarah Duffy on.
Love them. Oh my gosh. So that was one of those things where Shelly is, oh my God, I have nothing. She's another one.
Amazing.
You know, I look at, this is terrible because I've now said this on 2 other podcasts, but I don't always get along with women because they annoy me. They just do. I am one.
Don't say anything, John.
Right. He knows.
Don't say
Just listen.
anything.
I know the rules.
He knows the rules. But most women will agree because we are this weird breed. And if there's too many of us together, it's just not good. So Shelly Duffy is the exception to the rule, and she knows that. And Shelly did the same thing with the Natalie thing. You know, John, when people ask us how we've started, I always say, thank you for bringing me into your brand, right? He says, thank you for elevating my brand. So that's why we work.
Got
okay,
it.
like that's the bottom
Got
line.
it.
That being said, I still to this day will say to him, well, I don't know, it's your thing. And he wants to punch me in my face, but he can't. So we did something with Shelly and Paul, and she had a couple drinks. And
You don't say, Shelly. You don't say.
so it was for Junior Achievement. We were interviewing her, and she came over and she said, Rachel, I love what you've brought to the podcast. You've really brought that up. And John's like, see? So I love the fact that I didn't know her well at the time because this was 2 years ago. She is a female. She gets it. And he says it and it was able to kind of go back and say,
Sure.
see, somebody
Yeah,
else says
validation.
it. I'm getting a picture of this. So Shelly went on and on and on and had a few drinks in her. So it was truth, right? Then when I saw her completely composed, she did the same thing. I appreciate her because she's been in this field. She gets it. She worked hard. She was a single mom. She put her all into it. And now here she is recreating herself. I have more respect and kudos for her than most women in the city. And not to mention, I mean, she's just a gem of a person. And so her daughters, you know, I listen and I watch their little debacles that they have. And
You know they were on here for a full 2
I didn't
hours.
know
Is that right?
Oh,
No.
you need to go back. They're coming
have
a
to
couple
go
of days
watch that.
after Thanksgiving. They're coming back for round 2.
Okay.
Love it.
Oh my
yeah,
God.
it was
The Duffy women.
The Duffy women it was the Duffy women. It was phrased as the Duffy women invade Boogie Street.
Love it.
Or Eric McKenna survives the Duffy women.
There you
After
go.
it was all done,
That's
I looked at Sarah and I looked at Alex and I looked over here at Shelly. I think they got the best of me.
Yeah, no question. And so we had them on. We had Shelly and Paul. We had just Shelly.
Yeah.
But we had them all on.
Pittsburgh power couple. That's what I call them.
No
yeah,
doubt.
for sure. But we had the 3 girls on, and Alex was remote, obviously.
Yeah.
But
Right.
it was a great podcast. Again, content. You know, and reality. They're not going to tell you. They're not Kardashians, that's for sure.
And for me, I love the fact that, you know, I feel like I invited Rachel into this dumpster fire that we didn't know what was going to be, right?
There you go.
We didn't know what it was ever going to be.
I've seen dumpster fires. This is about dumpster fire.
And then here we are progressed where one of the well-known media personalities in Pittsburgh and well-respected personalities says that recognizes Rachael for what she's doing, and it warms my heart.
Well, and not being Johnny Angel's daughter, right?
Right,
That's
right.
always been I will not tell you that because, and my dad loves that, right? So there has always been that fact. Even when I worked at the Tribune Review, I never said it,
right?
Because he is so beloved in the music industry.
No question.
No reason for me to say that. That's his thing. Super proud. Again, a gift that he gave me by teaching, right? But by the same token, that you do you, and so let me figure out me. And I was able to do that without having that. Now that we're sort of in the same circles, I will say, oh, well, that's who my dad is, because there's now this respect established.
Absolutely right.
Yeah,
absolutely right. And to that, you can't leave until I hear the James Brown story.
Oh, yeah. I want to tell you one more. I have one more story in the Jagoff timeline, if you don't mind. So Alex Duffy fits into the Jagoff timeline, right?
Oh, yes.
So there are iconic moments in the Jagoff timeline, AR and BR, and so
and
one
Alex
of them,
Duffy.
when it was anonymous, again, there was the Wahina Media moment, and then one day I was on a webinar talking about social media, and I was a screen share, and I didn't realize that the tab of the blog was open at the top, across the top.
Okay.
So this girl on the webinar, Alex Duffy, says, "Excuse me." We said, "Are there any questions?" She said, "Yes, I have a question. Is someone on this webinar from YaJagoff?" I'm like, "Oh God!" I could feel my face get so red I wasn't even on the screen. So it was like, she goes, "Can I talk to you?" And so we ended up meeting, and she wanted to know something.
Isn't
She's
that
asking
cute?
this 50-year-old guy about social media. I'm like, wait, you should be teaching me. But funny, because that's some of the timeline of how it's evolved. And then Mr. Shribman at the Post-Gazette banned the word Jagoff from the Post-Gazette. And so I ended up...
I didn't know that.
So we ended up banning the word Post-Gazette from the YaJagoff blog.
Of course.
Right?
We'll show you.
Yeah. For tit for tat, right?
You're right. And
Son of
so,
a bitches.
and then
That's right.
And then that happened. So that ended up getting a cover story in the city paper. And then when Trump was when people were stumping for Hillary Clinton, you may remember Mark Cuban came to
I couldn't
Pittsburgh
think of who it was.
and called Trump a Jagoff. Well, suddenly the website lit up because the people like the newspapers in California, the Los Angeles Times, they were like, "Can we say that word? Is it a swear word?" And then prior to that, we had done a stunt to raise money for the Pittsburgh Emergency Medicine Foundation, and we said we were trying to get the word Jagoff into the dictionary.
Right.
We ended up raising a couple $1,000 because for everybody that signed a petition, we had IT give $1 for every signature. So, point being, nothing really, it never went into the dictionary at that point, whatever. 2 years later, got into the Oxford Dictionary.
Oxford, right.
Which had nothing to do with. My cousins were on Facebook. My cousin John got this in the dictionary. People from the radio stations were calling, like, whatever.
How'd
And
you do
then
that?
just this week, the Chicago version of Pittsburgh Magazine.
I saw that.
Wrote, and they mentioned that YaJagoff.com
They mentioned the website.
We're like,
Yeah.
what?
Can't beat
So
that.
all the YaJagoff branding has there's been this odd timeline. But Alex Duffy, I just remember, it made me think of it when she said, "Is someone from YaJagoff on there?" I'm like, "Oh God, please shut up."
Is that how
please."
she talked?
Yes. That's a very good imitation. You probably thought that was her, didn't you?
You have to just do yourself a favor. Just peruse
We are
that
gonna-
show.
yeah, we will
Because
watch
they
it for
were
sure.
at Sarah, Alex,
We
and
will.
Shelley.
Oh my God, that's
and
funny.
and Shelley was like, "Well, we're gonna. I think about 15 minutes to an hour is gonna be perfect, and we have a lot going on." And I said, "Absolutely, whatever you want to do." Almost 2.5 hours later, the girls just ran with it.
It's
But it
so
was really
funny.
cool though, because it gave me a chance to ask women from different generations some things that were
yeah.
on my mind.
Sure.
And of course,
Yeah.
it's funny. It's a little enlightening. It was enlightening for me. And there was a little alcohol involved too. So they had the whole thing going on
God.
here. You had the whole thing going on. But they're coming
Yeah.
back, I think on the 30th.
I love
We don't
it.
date the shows here, but roughly after Thanksgiving, they're coming
Yeah.
back. We're filming again.
Do it. We'll definitely do it.
All right, James Brown story. Do
It's
it,
It's not
mate.
that. Listen, he builds it.
This is my favorite
No,
story.
he builds it too much. It's really not. It's nothing. I was lucky enough to be around that lifestyle. And, like I think what's funnier is I say my wedding band was the Vogues.
Wow.
Like, says that?
Wow.
To me, that's
And the
a bigger...
Temptations had a table.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
But-
That's amazing.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. To me, just having the Vogues there, like they were my, I was like, hey, Chuck, can you sing the song My Special Angel next? So I went to an all-girl Catholic school. I was born and raised in Brighton Heights.
Okay.
And so my dad is super strict, old school, and was like, you are not going to a public school because God forbid. And so I went to Mount Alvernia, and the nuns they were Franciscan nuns, and everything was done by the book. So my dad had just performed at Three Rivers Stadium with James Brown. I came into school the next day, and at basketball practice I started talking about how I was with James Brown, and so like girls were like, and so the next day they coerced me to have the conversation again. And when I did, the next thing I know, the principal called me to the office, and she said, we don't lie. We are a Catholic school, and we're all
my gosh.
held in this esteem kind of thing.
Okay.
And she said, I said, but I did meet James Brown. And she said, well, then I have to call your mother. So she called my mom. And my mom reminded me that she thought they were calling to book the band. So she was like, yeah. And the sister Charlene said,
your mom.
well, your daughter is lying and saying, my mom's like, she is not lying. She was with James Brown. So that's his favor.
Right. I mean, her experiences are unbelievable. When you talk about the people who have had dinner at their house in Brighton Heights on a regular basis, just come over and have pasta.
Sunday dinner.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, and my dad would tell you, that I've not written his book yet. He just told you on Sunday. Because there were so many experiences, and it's funny because my dad drove me nuts on certain things, as all of our parents have. And I hear myself doing the same thing to my kids. I will say, just look them in the eye. I get it. You don't want to have a conversation, just look them in the eye, And I think, my pride is that my kids are very, like, they could sit here and if you said, hi, Dominic, how are you? He wouldn't go, good. He would say, I'm well, how are you?
Right.
And that's all you.
He's engaging.
He's engaging, yeah. And so he also thinks that, what does he think I do? I'm a public speaker. He said, these PTO moms were like, what does your mom do for a living? And I'm like, oh, I can imagine how that went down, And he was like, I think she's a public speaker.
We just had that experience, remember? So we were someplace public, and somebody said, oh, they have the Jagoff podcast, and these two older ladies in the corner going...
It was election day, John. It was election day.
Yeah, and she was ready for school.
Williams.
We have the Jagoff podcast. These two ladies.
They were like this. She said, I saw them. I'm like,
It's not a swear word.
Right.
Yeah,
I can remember my
just
parents
stop.
horrified when I was using it, like in high school.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
it's not.
But it's not
John
a swear word.
Shumway asks us that all the time too. Like, what was it like?
When we did the Jagoff dictionary thing? It was the petition. 50% of the people said this is a swear word. You should not be doing this on the news because every news station covered it. But on the other hand, 50% of the people were like, my grandfather said it, my this, my that. So it was really cut down the line, almost half and half. Some people said it's a swear word and some people not. We've had Barbara Johnstone on from CMU who does the whole thing about Pittsburghese at CMU, and she said, look, it's not for me to define what a swear word is, but it is not based on anything else you might think of that might be a swearing phrase.
But it's interesting that those outside the market hear it.
Right.
And
Yes.
then they look at it peculiar.
Yes.
It's not Jack.
Nope.
It's Jag.
Oh, I hate that.
There's
that.
a G.
Yeah.
There's a
Right.
G in there. A G.
Yeah,
Yes.
that drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the...
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's part of Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
Well, no doubt
absolutely.
about it. And we've been very fortunate because of the name. And again, all thanks to Bugga at the Stroll In.
Yeah, and that was one of our favorite interviews for sure.
It was the
First
one
started,
I always
right?
wanted
Yeah.
to get. Yeah, she was the one.
He would say to me, I would say, John, we have to get that story.
Okay.
And he'd say, good luck. She's not going to do it. I've tried how many times and it's not going to happen. And I don't even know what made her decide this.
Well, she had gone through some health issues, and she
Right.
she was getting her teeth fixed and this and that, and her daughter would just say, she's just not ready. She's just not ready. Then one day they called and said, we're ready. We're like, let's get there. Like within a week, let's hurry up and get there. And it was one of the coolest things ever to sit in one of the stroll-in booths and talk about and just have her go at it. And we have more footage than we could ever air because
oh my God,
if we aired it, the FCC would probably come and shut down podcasts.
You're making me blush.
Is there anyone out there, I'll ask both of you, anyone, if you had a dream guest, and that's a probably tough question to answer, but just I'm going to throw it out there anyways. If you had a dream guest, someone on your spirit you'd love to have. Yeah, Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Love to have that you haven't had on yet.
Well, it would have to be Pittsburgh because...
Yeah, Pittsburgh based.
I mean, if we're not called the YaJagoff podcast because we live in San Diego.
Gotta think big.
I feel like we gave this answer before. Well, one of them was Cyril Wecht, and then we were able to interview him.
Oh, my God, yeah.
He's probably one of our favorites. Pete Hewlett is one of my absolute favorites. I love that man, and he knows it. And David Highfield is also one of my favorites. But I think mine would be Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, and I think...
Because no one talks to him, right? Like, he talks about the game. I want to sit and hear, like, what the hell was hockey like? You know, no one has really gotten the essence of that.
Oh, he's on my list.
Yeah.
He's on my list, too. I'd love to have him.
Yeah.
And, you know, I would actually like to, if it was national, I'd say Steve Martin, hands down.
Oh, yeah.
But if it was local, I would want to talk to Mario Lemieux and Jay Caulfield about that getting ready to come back, kind of that secrecy that they were doing down here at Raw RMU when they were building, you know, when Jay was working with Mario to build that back up. Just that bond. How does Mario, at his level, trust anybody? And then, you know, Jay Caulfield is the guy. How does he get selected as the guy?
Paul Alexander has a great story about that whole thing.
Is that
I was
right?
just going to say, I think I've heard that. Yeah.
Paul's got a great story about that.
Yeah.
That would be it. That would be it.
I think the other one I would want is Luke Ravenstall.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, I'm friends with the family, and, you know...
What's he doing now?
He's working.
He's a lobbyist,
a
right?
consultant.
Consultant.
Okay.
He's a consultant, and dude, he lives right by me.
Yeah.
But you know, they did a great job of just kind of getting him out.
Yeah.
Right. Be done. You're done. Move on. Again, I wouldn't get into politics, but I just think the story is he was one of the youngest. He went from stardom to nothing, and everybody wants to chastise. But, you know, go back to the biblical days. You know, don't throw stones because we all have skeletons.
And plus, there's probably a really good story there that may shed a completely different light on the entire scenario.
What else happened that this, no questions.
That's a part of Pittsburgh. It's a part of Pittsburgh history.
It's a fabric, I'm telling you.
You two are part of Pittsburgh history.
Oh, I don't know about that.
And you're making it as you go here.
Thanks, we're trying.
And I like it because I feel now I have a kindred spirit in both of you because I would wake up every day, my little concern here, and say, okay, what's the next 3 weeks going to look like? And it just keeps happening. And it's exciting because I just don't know.
You don't. And, you know, when this is so cliche, but to the same point, you have to fail in order to want it more. You know, we just talked at Chatham from the Natalie connection, and this kid, you could read it. You know, as a mom of a student ready for college,
right?
Looking in his face, you saw the fear, and he listened to all of us tell our stupid stories about media and how it changed and blah blah blah. After a while, it sounded like Charlie Brown's teacher, right? And he innocently and admittedly said, but I'm scared. And do you have to, I want to say, I'm paraphrasing. He said something like, don't you have to see what you want to do before you actually get to where you want to be, is essentially what he was asking. Yes. But you don't know that each step of the way because you're just like, this is it. This is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm so happy and la, 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 la. And 2 years later you go, how did I end up here? And sometimes you look at your phone and you go, damn, you know, that didn't work out. But there's a reason for it. And somehow, you know, just like we said, who would have thought? Me leaving. I walked away from an easier job where I could have collected a paycheck and done marketing and really used my mind and had less stress and less pressure. But instead, I said, I'm going to go ahead and do this on my own. And that completely turned because I realized that I had the best partner. So
I think passionate and clear in your purpose, right?
Yeah, right.
But then open-minded enough to realize just let it evolve.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and I think that's it because when that gentleman asked that question, when you look at the panel of these 4, counting Sarah on the panel, not one of them knew when they were in college that they were going to be part of Facebook, social media, or a thing called a podcast. So you have to be flexible and let it evolve and let it roll, right? You have to have some rules and some ethics and some ethos, but you have to be able to roll with it a bit and adapt, no doubt about it. Adaptability is probably the biggest. Yeah, it's hustle for sure. It's dedication to the cause. It's passion. And then it's the ability to be flexible.
Right. Yeah. You'll come back and see me?
Wait, are you coming on our podcast?
I'd be honored.
I was waiting.
I don't know what I could contribute, but I'll be glad to be on there.
I had to wait for him to say it. I would have asked you.
I'd be honored. And believe me, I am a Jagoff, so I will definitely fit in there.
There you go. We're gonna have to do some kind of like podcast of all podcasts and bring podcasters in and just interview them.
That'd be
that
cool.
would be a fun one.
That's a great idea. Yeah.
Did you say that's a good idea?
Yeah.
No?
He did say that.
You know, we have a competition on the podcast,
Every podcast
to see
we say,
when a guest says, "Oh, John, that's a great question." We try to keep score as to who actually gets those.
But I win.
And I try to let her win
You'll
because
never win that one.
Well, in the man's manual, it's page 17. Page 17. Let the woman always think she won.
Even when you win,
right.
you'll never win. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This was
Thanks
awesome.
for having me.
Thank you.
I can't wait to round number 2.
Yes.
All right.
Perfect.
Yes.
We
Take
can't
care.
Wait. Thank you. That was perfect.
Good.
That was a good time. Hell yeah.
That was fantastic.